Thank you, Michael, and thank you to online audience. And to the online audience, even though the background is my home garden, but actually I am in LA right now, and in the beautiful sort of room in pronounced as a Bunch Hall, yeah, on the 10th floor of Bunch Hall of UCLA. Very nice place. Okay, so unfortunately, the topic today is a little bit contentious and controversial, right? And I'm going to talk to you about the so-called chips war, essentially the contestation in this particular semiconductor industry, but also to alert you to the importance of understanding, if you like, the technicality of this industry, and hence offering you what we call global production networks or global value chain perspective. In other words, to unpack what the industry is about, and hence to understand how geopolitical rivalries may or may not work out in the way they are meant to be. Okay, hold on. Okay, here we go. So the first section, I will be fairly brief on some of the geopolitical shifts, post-pandemic challenges, and then I will spend a bit of time to explain the semiconductor industry. I'm not entirely sure how many of you know a little bit about the industry or a lot about the industry, but we'll see how it goes. And of course, end with some discussion on, research agenda.
I'm not sure about that acronym GPNs.
Hi.
GPNs.
For global production networks. Hi. Yeah, no worries. So global production networks, or GVC, global value chain. The work is done based at my own university, National University of Singapore, the Global Production Network Center, with my former colleagues. This is a presentation we gave to some of the financial communities. The work is also based on my recent publications, 2015 Global Production Networks with my colleague Neil Cole. This is a theory book on global production networks or global value chain with Oxford. And then 2016, as Michael mentioned, I've written and published this book, Strategic Coupling, to examine how East Asian economies from South Korea to Taiwan to Singapore are coupled with global production networks and kind of move away from what's called the developmental state paradigm, published with Peter Kassenstein's Cornell Studies in Political Economy. Today's presentation is based more on the 2020 book, which is published with Stanford, which is on the interconnected worlds of the electronics industry, in which I examine the smartphone industry, which I know extremely well, laptop, what you have and I have, and what goes inside, which will be the chips. And today we focus on the chips. This book has won some awards as well, including the ISA Asia Pacific Distinguished Book Award recently at the International Studies Association meeting. Also last year, the Global Value Chain Development Report by the WTO Asia Development Bank was published in November. I'm the lead author of chapter 4, which is on semiconductors. So in other words, this topic is important enough for WTO and others to consider. Last year, about this time, I went to the Hashka Olin Conference. If you do economics, you will have learned the HO model. This is the Stockholm School of Economics Conference. I gave a talk on the topic about relocation of production, localization of production, with both academics and policymakers, with, for example, Mark Medley from Harvard and Penny Goldberg, who was the chief economist of World Bank, as well as policymakers. And Annabelle was the Deputy Director General of WTO, number 2 in other words. And Cecilia Malmström was the former commissioner of the EU Commissioner for Trade. So in other words, this topic is of importance to both academics and important policymakers, because as we know, this is really very contested. So let me proceed with the presentation itself. Now we know something happened that, of course, made us, including Michael, difficult to travel across the, in this case, the Pacific, all right? But of course, something else also happened, all right, which is a little thing that President Biden was holding, known as the chip, all right? And of course, we know in the past 2 years, 2022, 23, there were severe chip shortages. If you have ordered electronics product, EV, cars, you will have wait months for your product because there were shortages in particular kind of chips. And of course, there was something going on as well in terms of, Russian invasion of Ukraine, of course, the latest Middle East conflicts, the Palestinian difficulties, as well as, of course, trade war going on since, of course, Trump's presidency, and many other issues at stake. So in other words, all of these are really pretty much entangled particularly in terms of both international relations. I'm more a specialist in what's called international political economy, IPE, and so on and so forth. So this gives you some sort of setting of the issues at stake. So what's the problem? So what I'm trying to do today is to kind of problematize the existing rivalries in the semiconductor industry to give you a sense of what I will call the trouble with global production networks. Why do I call it a trouble? This actually is named after Judith Butler, the feminist scholars, gender trouble, all right? Here we are talking about GPN trouble in the sense that you can't just look at one location, one nation in terms of semiconductor leading or not leading, because this industry is not about nations per se. It's about the interconnectedness, the production networks, the value chains that stretch across national boundaries in many, many locations, as well as regions of the world. So I give you this sort of initial argument. Hopefully I can run it through in terms of the actual presentation. And hence, this is a very troubling industry. An industry that is not what a nation per se can contain and do. That's the real key argument, all right? And you can only kind of understand it if you understand the GPN or GBCs of this particular industry. Now we know, of course, Intel CEO telling you that chips will be short all the way until 2023. We are now in May 2024. We begin to see recovery, partly because of massive growth in manufacturing or factory in short fab establishment. Again, if you have ordered Mac and the likes, which I'm a Mac user for ages, you will know that 1 or 2 years ago, it was difficult. Even this MacBook Pro 2022 took like for 4 months to be delivered, which is very unusual. In the past, before the pandemic, it's normally only 1 to 2 weeks, that fast. That is not the only problem. You have factories closed. You have many factories of automotive workers who have to go home because the production line cannot proceed due to the shortages of some chips, which are critical in the modules that goes into the safety system and the like, yeah? So on and so forth. So you are not talking about small matter and so on and so forth. You're talking about very significant disruptions in the industrial scale. But of course, this is even more prominent. You don't find an American president holding a wafer in his hand showing you something. By the way, this is a wafer that you cannot eat. Okay, this is a wafer that is, every wafer, 12-inch, contains few hundred chips in them, all right? And of course, as you know, your country, because I am standing in America, has put in $52 billion CHIPS Act to support the manufacturing, or at least more manufacturing of chips, including, of course, foreign entities such as TSMC from Taiwan, and so on and so forth. The Europeans are not sort of forgetting that they used to make very good chips. So the Europeans came up with the European Chips Act, 43 billion euro, all right, in order to support this industry. And hence, this is the rare time in recent memory that you have both the US and European and countries starting with what's called industrial policies, which of course used to be what East Asian economies do, and be, of course, a lecture about you shouldn't do that, the state should not intervene, and so on and so forth. Yeah, that's not this kind of chips you eat, okay? Now, geopolitical shift, no small matter, right? Unfortunately, we are in an era of significant geopolitical tensions, but of course, I'm not a political geographer who tell you more about geopolitics per se. I will just outline this by saying that in the semiconductor industry, or the semicon is one part of that geopolitical rivalry and tension, which of course get exacerbated by the Russian invasion of Ukraine. However, the point I actually want to make is this, is that even if there was no recent geopolitical tension, let's say US-China good relations, the technological competition, which is point 2, will always be there. Why? Because, well, Silicon Valley guys will continue to advance its chips technology, as well as in Asian economy and European economies. In other words, technological competition will always be there, irrespective of geopolitical tensions. This is something you've got to bear in mind. But of course, as we are talking about geopolitical tension, the technology side of the story become even more prominent, to the extent some of you may know the rise of what's called NVIDIA, yeah, which become one of the #3 most capitalized company in the world now, which is based in Silicon Valley. But of course, There are other issues at stake, which will have huge impact on different industries, from electronics to automotive to or anything that requires chips. There will be all sorts of medical equipment and so on and so forth. There is also the sort of continual debate about how much manufacturing we should expect to depend on China, right? The idea of China as a global factory started with, of course, China's admission into WTO 2011, and hence China became a significant manufacturer. The US, as you know, I mean, you used to go into Walmart, everything you pick up, almost all made in China. Now, of course, you want to reduce that dependency, right? So if you like, this whole idea of reducing dependency on China, this whole idea itself is also manufactured now. Yeah, so the reduction is a manufactured idea, so to speak. I don't have to tell you more. The efforts to bring production back to America, reshoring, decoupling, these are the initiatives that tried to get, if you like, China to be less part of the global manufacturing center. However, it's easier to say than do. Why? Because even for the leading firm like Apple to shift production out of China, now the iPhone used to be 90+% assembled in China, to move even 5 to 10% of iPhone's production out of China. Now talking about India, maybe Southeast Asia, it will take anything from 3 to 5 years. It's not you just pack your bag and go. Like tomorrow, I will just fly out of LA, that easy. It takes years. Why? Because you're talking about a whole chain of event activities, if you like, the whole production network, the whole ecosystem. Not so simple. There are many sort of press on this kind of material. And of course, from Southeast Asia, I mean, I'm from Singapore, from Southeast Asia's point of view, it's good for us, it's good for business, because we see, if you like, relocation of those activities in Southeast Asia. Right? So instead of relocating back to America, the likeliest phenomenon will be relocation out of China, some parts of it, but going to Southeast Asia, some go to South Asia, a few goes to Latin America, and so on and so forth. So this is the talk about made in India iPhones, and much harder. Meanwhile, as I mentioned earlier, in the US, you're talking about very, very important policy initiatives, such as the CHIPS Act, and I bet none of you can spell out what CHIPS stand for in CHIPS Act. Creating CHIPS, all right, creating healthy incentives for the production of semiconductors in America Act. That actually is the full, act. Yeah, you can Google it, all right? And 52 billion is a lot. I mean, we can probably buy that entire hill now, right? Since I know the price is less than 100 mil each. And let me give you some figure. And of course, Biden went to Chancellor Arizona just how many? 1.5 months ago, 2 months ago, all right? Because tomorrow I'm going China, Arizona, literally, okay? To see how the Intel fabs look like. The moral of the story is the CHIPS Act has started to kind of be dispersed, just started being dispersed, right? To Intel, to TSMC, to Samsung, all right? Sounds good, right, isn't it? These are important initiatives, no small matter. Let me give you some actual figures. TSMC, the world's leading manufacturer of advanced chips at this point, from Taiwan Semiconductor Manufacturing Company, TSMC, per year in recent years has been investing 30 to 35 billion per company. Samsung is even bigger because it has memory business, memory chips, not just, if you like, logic chips. Samsung invests up to 40 or even 45 billion per year. Now remember, 52 billion your country can put up for many companies. This is one company per, this is 52 over 5 years. We're talking about company per year, all right? And Intel is number 3 in terms of money, capital spending. Intel is it's number 3 in technology too, because TSMC and Samsung now are both more advanced in making the most advanced chips than Intel. But Intel is trying to catch up. Intel used to be number 1 for decades, all right? Intel is putting up 20+ billion per year. So that gives you some sense of the parameters. When you hear so much about, the big money put in, actually all the big money is, generally speaking, a small change in the world of semiconductors. It's not that much money out of 52 billion. And you may say, oh, China is putting 150 billion, even more, but again, over 5-10 years. So numerically, it's not that gigantic. And I think this kind of what we call protective, defensive industrial policy, because it's the kind of policy to catch up, yeah, minus, of course, the national security issue, which we can discuss later on maybe. These kind of interventions are less likely to produce the kind of effects the policies intend to be. For example, the TSMC fab, which again, tomorrow I'm going to a northern Phoenix to see it, all right, was meant to be ready for mass production, the 5 nanometer one, now, 2024, all right? So in my 2020 book, which was finished in 2021, the initiative was announced, the CHIPS Act, and I already wrote into my book predicting that I doubt it will work in 2024. And true enough, it's going to be delayed, all right? So that kind of industrial renaissance or made in America, in this case, there are inherent limits. There must be reasons why the chip making wasn't strong here and in the first place. So much so that you now want more chip production back in America, all right? And TSMC Arizona also promised that it will go into 3 and 2 nanometer and invest eventually up to 40 billion after President Biden's visit. Delay, of course. If you look at the current happening, TSMC is delayed. The 5 nano fab at least 1 year. Next year, we'll have to see. There are specific reasons, we can go into it later, which are to do with the difficulties of setting up production networks. Again, the more advanced fab will come out no earlier than 2027, 28. So you can visualize, this is talking about 5 years from the day when we realize the problem. And you know how much the world will move within the semiconductor industry in 5 years? And hence, even though your Commerce Secretary mentioned that, yeah, they have promised the latest technology, yeah, latest today. But remember, by 2028, the latest will still be in Taiwan, not here, all right? Because you are building the latest 5 years down the road here. Even Intel got delayed. So even Intel, Ohio fab was delayed for 2 to 3 years. So this is an industry which is not so easy to just set up or pack up and go, because the production, the setting up of the factory is very complex. It is extremely complex, 3 Michelin star kitchen, which is not easy to set up. You need the chef to be there to work collaboratively with a whole bunch of, if you like, pots and pans suppliers to work very well together. And these are different suppliers. I just give you some idea. Later, I will go into more technical details. Yeah? I hope I've given you some flavor of the challenges of this industry. First, money is very big. 52 billion is not enough. Second, the organization of the industry is extremely complex. There are very few suppliers or only one in specific tools and equipment, which again, you are constrained by that kind of bottleneck. 3, labor, means skilled workers. How many Americans want to be, if you like, a semiconductor manufacturing engineer? Well, most people want to be in Hollywood and in Wall Street and in Silicon Valley, isn't it? Means software, high tech. So that's the problem. In Korea, I gave you the contrast. Korea wants to kind of sustain its leadership, right? It's putting a huge amount of money to set up, and of course, Korea, of course, the EPA, Environmental Protection Agency equivalent, has a relatively easier way to let the big chip makers to build fabs like this. You just move the mountain, straight away build, all right? And of course, one of the delay in Arizona is due to also EPA restrictions. To clear EPA takes time, as you know, just like the wonderful bureaucracy in some university, I heard. And so, CHIPS Act is one part of the industrial policies that Europeans, China, Taiwan has been supporting its firms, South Korea, and Japan. So this is not unusual in a way as a kind of policy, but of course it's unusual for America and for Europe to do it because you don't really have long-standing history of doing this kind of industrial policy, except of course defense spending. That again is a separate kind of industrial policy. We can go into a discussion later. Now, one of the major equipment suppliers called ASML at the bottom 1.5 years ago when they make the report. Now, this is the company that supplied the most advanced photocopying machine, let's call it lithography machine. And the only one, this is the only one, is predicting that by 2030, if all of the industrial policies will create the effect, the whole industry will be minus 10% in efficiency, meaning oversupply and because you just have many more kitchens and you have fewer customers. What happened? Then of course, people work in the kitchen will have less work to do, which is not good for business. Yeah? Mind you, this is a company that want to sell more pans and pots, and yet telling you that, hey, don't set up too many restaurants because we're going to be in trouble. So we should take their words because it's likely that they are truthful. Maybe it's more than 10%. Who knows? Now, of course, as we are talking about, the industry is not in favor of having too many fabs. The countries or the nations are also having difficulties. South Korea, for example, said that the CHIPS Act is problematic because you make our firm, which is Samsung and SK Hynix, taking your incentive in America, but they're not allowed to invest in China or upgrade China facility. It's not good because, it's not in our national interest, right? So on and so forth. So as you can tell, South Korea asked the US. And in Taiwan, same. This is Mark Liu, the chairman of TSMC, is saying that, again, the CHIPS Act, there are restrictions which are unacceptable. Of course, they play the political game. They want some of your money, a few billion, right? It's better than nothing. On the other hand, they want to tell you that please don't intervene in how we do things. Yeah? So as some of you may know, there are specific requirements on CHIPS Act, including childcare availability, things like that. There are many restrictions. You've got to go through the fine prints. TSMC again trying to tell you that geopolitical rivalries typically distort the chip market. That's what the CEO is telling us. And of course, President Biden is trying to build what is called the CHIPS 4, number 4 alliance. The 4 refers to the US, Japan, South Korea, and Taiwan. And of course, it's now also asking the Netherlands, which is where ASML came from, and Germany and Japan. The 2 additional, Netherlands and Germany, to be involved. All right. But of course, each of them is quite resistant, each of the nations. The reason I use the word nation because I have Taiwan in my list. So I've got to be reasonably careful about the term. Right. I give you a quote from the current CEO of the TSMC sometime in 1.5 years ago, when he went to the south of Taiwan called Tainan to open then the 3 nanometer, means the world's most advanced fab that went into already mass production. All right. So he said this: everyone wants to build their own semiconductor factories, but is that realistic? If it was that easy, there would be chip making plants everywhere in the world already. Yeah. Let me finish it by saying that take TSMC itself, for example, even within our own company, transferring technologies we developed from the Taiwanese city of Hsinchu. Hsinchu is the headquarters of TSMC in the middle, slightly middle, above Taichung, to our site in Tainan, which is where he was to open the fab, required a lot of hard, painstaking work. Never mind moving from Hsinchu to the US. US means Arizona fab in this case. In other words, even though all of their engineers are already available, to build a new kitchen in the south of Taiwan is already difficult, even though the high-speed rail is only half an hour. Then the engineers have to go there to help set up. But to come across to you guys here is a totally different story, okay? So as you can tell, this is a very peculiar industry. It's not so simple, not so easy. Big money is, well, useful, necessary, but not sufficient condition. Unfortunately, as we are talking about, nations want to put big money, companies, invest billions of dollars. The semiconductor industry last year, 2023, had a hard time. Yeah, had a 10 to 15% decline in revenue, and hence TSMC expected by now has recovered a little. All right, so right now we are on a kind of slightly recovery trend, but last year was really bad. All right, how many of you bought a new computer recently? Laptop, smartphone. Okay, recent. They're wealthy. Okay, the rest of us
Getting more expensive.
Yeah, of course, because the chips are short, and that's why it become more expensive. Yeah. So the problem is you're not buying enough. All of you have to buy. Otherwise, last year was a total decline in both smartphone, PC, and hence the chip. Because basically half of the world's chips go into smartphone and laptops, roughly. Okay, just give you some idea. So this is just to give you some figures. Smartphone decline 2022, decline 2023. Why? Because of course, since the pandemic, most people end up buying the laptop to do the Zoom and everything else, and buy less of the smartphone. PC same, -16 in 2022, -7% last year. This year is supposed to recover because it's only halfway. We cannot be sure. The second half, who knows, bad things happen, all right? We don't know, but it's a tricky time. So last year, semicon minus 14 to 15%. And if you look at all the major companies from Samsung to Micron, which is from the US, these are memory chips, and SK Hynix, essentially had declined last year in revenue, quite severely in some cases. This year is partly saved by, if you like, the AI revolution and primarily by NVIDIA, yeah, because NVIDIA's chips require high density memory chips. And the foundries means the ones who make chips for others like TSMC, same revenue change last year was minus 12%. You have to understand, I mean, these are companies that invest billions, I mean, tens of billions per year. When you have declined revenue, it has a significant impact, all right, on their profitability and so on and so forth. Intel was okay last year, 4% growth, not decline, all right? But by and large, it's not in good shape, the industry as a whole. So I hope I've given you enough sort of empirical material up to this point to get a feel of the geopolitical challenges, a feel of, if you like, how industrial policies are framed, a little bit feel of the nature of the industry, all right, and the challenges we face in so-called rebuilding better or building more, so on and so forth. One way to understand this better from an academic point of view or conceptually is through the idea of understanding the global production networks or global value chain of semiconductor industry. And this is what I want to do in the second part. Now, this is a very large literature. I cannot be sure how many of you are familiar with this literature. It started in the if you like, early 1990s, almost like when I started doing my PhD by some of these major scholars like Gary Geoffrey, who's an economic sociologist at Duke, and then many others. Today, almost 30 years down the road, the literature is extremely well developed across the entire social sciences, from economics to political science to geography, of course, sociology, technology studies, regional, you name it, and business schools as well, all right? So, of course, we are also interconnected in terms of the community, we know each other. I've done a summary paper in Journal of International Business Studies. If you're interested, you can download it, open access, to see the state of the play of the literature. Last year, we went to Beijing to launch the GVC report, and me on the extreme left, but with everybody is an economist, all right? So, and they're there, and I'm a geographer, so it's a lone geographer in the group. If you're interested, you can download at the WTO website, also the entire global value chain development report. So in this entire literature, very briefly, this is the only slide I talk about kind of theory. There are two big strands. One is the global value chain approach. The key idea is to examine how the industry is governed, all right? How different chains like your clothing is governed differently from semiconductors, from automotive, from your Starbucks beans, and so on and so forth. The literature originally started with the study of Asia, but Asia as the manufacturer for your department stores here in the US. So the original study by Geoffrey in 1994 was very much about how American consumers, through what we call the lead firms, means your retailers and wholesalers, drive Asian manufacturing. We make for you, so to speak. And that story is by now extremely well known. And hence, that's how the literature started. The whole idea is to see who gets more out of what, doing which part of the value chain. You do design, you get more value than, say, you do the hard work of stitching the clothes, so on and so forth, all right? Then, of course, because you're in the right segment of the value chain, you may get upgraded better. I mean, it's almost like taking a plane tomorrow. Who doesn't like upgrade, isn't it? Nobody wants downgrade. Huh? So value capture is the same. You want to get more out of the value chain, right? For this particular garment, you don't want to pay 100 USD. Or you want to pay 100 USD, but you want to capture the entire 100 USD also, so to speak, right? Rather than just $5 US, so on and so forth. So that's what the literature is about. I'm more familiar with the global production networks approach, of which I'm fortunate to be a member of the development of the literature from Global Production Networks 1.0 when I was in Manchester to, of course, now National University of Singapore. We are interested in how economic activities as geographers are located, where they are, how activities are embedded through particular social relations, political economy, and so on, and develop the notion of strategic coupling. So if you're interested in this literature, equally, you can look at our sort of review paper in Journal of Economic Geography 2019. Now, this is the most famous conceptual figure arising from this particular study by Gary Giraffe, Tim Sturgeon at MIT, and John Humphrey at University of Sussex. All right, this paper is the pioneering paper, 2005, published in Review of International Political Economy, in which they outline 5 different governance structures of global value chain, from everything done within the market to, of course, everything controlled by one firm hierarchy or somewhere in between. You can organize it in a modular, different blocks, right? Or you can organize it relationally so that the lead firm and the suppliers are close, and hence value capture will be more in favor of the suppliers, or in a more captive mode, whereby the lead firm get most of the value and the suppliers are merely subordinate, and so on and so forth. This is the sort of primary frame of this body of work that help us to understand who get how much, where, and what, right? Now, my only little contribution to this paper is that I was the editor accepting the paper. Paper is not small matter. 2019 BC, before COVID, we met up at a conference in New York, right? So that's Giraffe in red, and then John Humphrey in the middle, and then Tim Sturgeon. The paper has been cited more than 10,000 times on Google, all right? So you're not talking about a small little paper. You're talking about a very, very influential paper in our field. Of course, we meet up again, and this is Tim Sturgeon and Gary Giraffe, the whole gang in the conference called SASE, Society for Advancement in Social Economics. The next one will be held in Limerick next month in Ireland. My only contribution is with my colleague Neil Cole in this theory book, in which we outline how global production networks can be understood conceptually as being driven by 4 different key factors, if you like. On the left, cost capability. Cost is important, of course, in why activities are allocated where they are. Market is important because you locate where you are in order to be nearer to market. Finance is important because financial markets drive firm behavior. American firms tend to be more short-term oriented and hence tend to outsource more than, say, Asian firms. Asian family firms tend to have a long-term patient capital and hence tend to internalize production. That's the singular difference why your iPhone is entirely outsourced and your Samsung Galaxy phone is entirely done by Samsung. That's the huge difference. Samsung makes most of the stuff that go into Samsung phones. Yeah. So in other words, competitive pressures on the left, different kind of firms in the middle lead to different kind of GPN or global production network strategies. Some go more insourcing, some go more outsourcing, and give you some idea. This, of course, applies across many different industries. As geographers, we are interested in the ultimate dependent variable, development, regional development outcome. Yeah, why, you know, LA or Southern California is doing better or worse in this industry than other parts of America. That's what we do. Geographical difference in development outcomes. I hope you get a sense of, you know, my discipline and so on and so forth. And LA geography, by the way, this university has an extremely influential and powerful department in our discipline. In another paper, I've given you graphically some idea how this works. Essentially, on the left is Silicon Valley, somewhere in the middle. I probably won't move so that the online people can see it. Me on the left is Silicon Valley in the US. We are not too far from it. On the right is just not hypothetical, it's the actual example of Taiwan and Taipei, all right? Whereby this is one production network, say, Hewlett Packard, HP. HP is Silicon Valley based, but its activities has huge impact on Taiwan, say Hsinchu, and vice versa. What happens in Taiwan shapes what goes on in Silicon Valley. I don't think I need to elaborate a lot more on this. You probably can follow quite easily this kind of interconnectedness of the 2 regions, yeah, which are, as you know, separated by long, very long distance. So how does a semiconductor global production network look like? Generally speaking, there are 2 ways of organizing semiconductor industry, okay? One on the left is that a firm will not have a factory, so it's fabless, and it designs chips on the left, such as Qualcomm, Apple, AMD, Advanced Micro Devices, or NVIDIA, the currently hottest AI chip company. And it will outsource. It designs the chip, but it cannot make, it doesn't make, because it doesn't want to spend billions of dollars to build the factory, and it may not be able to run the factories well. Fine, you get someone to do it. So you design the menu, you get someone to cook the food, which is foundry. We call TSMC or Samsung currently other leaders. I don't think it's difficult for you to follow that, right? Then you will have APT for assembly, packaging, testing. You need to test the chips. You know, the one that Biden was holding, you cut out the little part in order then to test it and then put it into the actual thing that looks like a chip above and looks like an Apple chip, so on and so forth. So can follow? Easy? Yeah, once the chip is made, then it goes to industrial users, not us. We don't eat the chips. It go into somebody, whether it is to do with the one to make your computer, to make the smartphone, to make the car, whatever. On the right, extreme right, you have chip companies that not only design, but also make their own chips. In other words, you design a menu, you cook your own food, such as Intel and Samsung. Intel is the microprocessor, Samsung is memory chips. So these are what we call IDM, integrated device manufacturers. You design and manufacture. So these are the two primary ways of organizing production networks. Can follow? Some outsource, some do it by yourself. Very simple. What is complex is the middle part. All of this require a lot of inputs. Many of these inputs, they can't do it themselves, such as you need the software to design, like without PowerPoint slides, Zoom, I can't do what I'm doing right now. You need the software. It's called EDA. Let me put it up. Then you need, of course, the basic silicon, which is very cheap. But even so, there are only a few companies that make that nugget, whereby you slice each of the, if you like, wafers out. Then you need software. Currently it's being blocked. Maybe I'll just move to the left. Hold on. Yeah. Okay. So you need software. Then you need to put your design into like a mask. All right. The mask, so that then you use some kind of light to put through it, to then print the circuitry on to no bigger than the thumbnail of me. Right? And that is the advancement of semiconductors. Hold on. And yep, and this is what a fab looks like. But the most important thing is this machine, the ASML machine, the EUV extreme ultraviolet, right? It's a violet color EUV machine that is required for below 10 nanometer production. And this machine, as you can tell, human on the left there, is as big as this whole wall. Costs you only about 200 million euro, only, all right? And why do you think a new fab costs, advanced fab 3 nanometer costs 20 to 30 billion to build, another 23 to 30 billion to run for the next 10 years? It's because this machine alone is 200 mil, okay? And you need a few of them in your fab, per fab. And that's why it's at least $1 billion devoted to this machine for them. And by the way, ASML can only make 55 to 65 per year. You have thought, oh, I got money, give me the machine. No, we can only make so many. Why? Because the machine itself has few hundred components, few hundred suppliers. Itself is a global production network. The most critical bottleneck is the lens that goes into the machine. The middle, after the light, the laser technology, by the way, is by a company of a US origin, but acquired by by ASML. And that's why the US government can require ASML not to sell the machine to China, because the technology came from the US. But the most important thing is the lens. The lens is by an extremely well-known German brand of glass maker called Zeiss. Yeah, called Zeiss. I actually use Zeiss lens because Zeiss is the clearest. I can see you well, people, isn't it? The Zeiss lens inside this machine is as big as about maybe 4 of this table. Think of a big circle, lens this thick, all right? The skillful German workers can only polish so many because it's not easy. But it's so accurate that this machine, plus the laser shoot from Earth to the moon, ASML claims that the deviation is no more than 1 meter. How accurate? Shoot from here to moon, 1 meter through the lens. You know the accuracy. In order to make, you know how big is 2 nano, 3 nano? 1, okay. Our hair divided by 1 millionth is 1 nanometer. Okay, you chop your hair by 1 millionth portion and see if you can see it. If you can, I don't want to talk to you.
I have no hair.
You have some, but your hair thickness is the same as mine, whatever the color. So the moral of the story is, as you can tell, the machine itself is extremely complex. It has its bottleneck, it has its production network, which cannot be easily substituted. It cannot be easily replicated, by the way. This is like very advanced thing. Then to build the whole fab, you need so many other parts and components. This is a production network that you cannot easily move, replace, and whatsoever. It takes time and effort to build. Yeah? Okay, so graphically, I just show you that. So you have chip design in Santa Clara, Silicon Valley. Then you have manufacturing done, say, in Hsinchu on the left. Then, of course, the chip go into assembly, into the equipment that we have in, say, China. And then, of course, ship to us anywhere as market. This is roughly what a global production looks like in a very simple form. If I map out the components, we can't see it. It's just too many. Yeah. So this is just to give you a feel. I won't go into great detail of this table. If you're interested, you can go to my 2022 paper in economic geography, in which I, by and large, explain why there is a geographical shift in chip making from, if you like, the US in particular, towards East Asia. The US used to make up to, say, 20 to 25% of chips. And those chips were relatively less advanced. But in the past 20 years, the advanced chips began to be outsourced more and more with the rise of US fabless chip design firms. So only Intel stays, but the rest start as firms without factories. And who does the manufacturing? Asian firms such as TSMC, later on Samsung, and so on and so forth. Just to give you some idea. I have every single fab, about 300-400 of them in the world, data on technology, output, and so on and so forth, to come up with this table. All right, so give you some idea. This is just another sort of visual display. In 2020, you see, you keep thinking, oh, America is not doing well in semiconductors. Is that true? In 2020, and then there is another table coming, America actually has about almost half of the world's market in semiconductors. All right, even though you're making only 10% of the world's chips, you're half of the world's market. Why? Because half of TSMC's output, 25% alone is taken by Apple. Apple means you and I, the users. So technically 25% of TSMC's output belong to America. Why? Because it's an American customer. It's almost like, you know, the food cooked by the kitchen. Remember, it's your restaurant. You are the chef. It's your market share because you are the one who deal with your customers, who make the money. Got it? Yes, you pay the kitchen to make your food. But after all, at the end of the day, you are the market. Yeah. So in that sense, America has easily up to half of the world's market share. However, manufacturing is a different story. Yeah. Korea is about 20% made. So 20% chips made in Korea. Of course, the vast majority are in memory chips. Memory chips, Korea dominates. Then in, if you like, what we call logic chips, means processor chips, Taiwan dominates, 22%. So together it's already 42, all right? China, 10 to 15%, tend to be in the less advanced chips. Even my little country known as Singapore, you know, we make 10% of the world's chips. You won't believe it, okay? As much as all of the fabs in Europe add together. So that's the extent to which chip manufacturing has shifted to East Asia. Of course, in Singapore, all of the chips came out of foreign-owned firms, including Micron, USA's most important memory chip manufacturer. All right. So as you can tell, Europe is 9%, US is 12%, roughly. Okay. Yep.
China's actually capacity is around 10%.
Yeah.
In the 26 along the value chain, Chinese share is very small.
In which category? This one?
In total,
yeah, this one is 15%. Yeah.
in the sales in world.
Oh, yes, correct. Only 7%. That's right. So if we measure by market, because you see, much of what China makes doesn't belong to China. Yeah. So 90% of iPhones made in China is not considered China's market share. Chinese buy the phone, but it's Apple that captures the value. So technically the chips belongs to Apple. means USA. Yeah. So of all of the world's Apple smartphones sold, the chips made will be considered US market share. Got it? So that's how we differentiate this. And that's why the US is not smart. The US actually owns half of the world's semiconductor industry in this sense of the word. It's just you're not making half of it, which probably you cannot make half of it anyway. All right, don't be foolish. In the chapter I've written for the Global Value Chain Development Report, I show you even more prominently the dominance of the US in this industry. The US owns 72% of the software. There are 3 or 4 companies only in the world, right? And all of them are US based. And there are smaller ones. So 72%, this is no surprise to you, right? How many of us do not use Microsoft? Huh? Everything Microsoft for us, right? Huh? So, software-wise, you think of a software company, which one is not from the US? It's a hard time for you to tell me, okay? It used to be what was it, SAS from Germany, right? Acrobat is US, Silicon Valley. Microsoft is Seattle. Anymore? Think of it, very few. Huh? In the semicon same, to design a chip, you need the software tools. And then all of them are US. And if you look at the design of chips, logic chips wise, again, processor chips, 2/3 are US. Why? You not only have Intel, but you also have NVIDIA. Basically, all the top chip design firms, with 1 or 2 exceptions, Taiwan ones, are all American firms. NVIDIA currently, AMD, Broadcom, Qualcomm makes the smartphone processor chips, also US, Silicon. They are all Silicon Valley based. Yeah. So you have to understand, this is a production network distribution whereby US specializes in design of chips, in the software that goes in the design of the chips, in the equipment that's used in the making of the chips. Even the equipment, US has 42% of the share. It's a lot, okay? Means in the typical fab, you have many machines which are US, Applied Material, Lam Research. They are again more Silicon Valley based. Have I given you enough of this idea that the US actually dominates the semiconductor industry, both in terms of design, in terms of software, in terms of hardware? It's just that you have less share in the kitchen, okay? You get that? Yeah? Is that a big problem? Maybe, depending on who you speak to, all right? And so on and so forth. China, in comparison, is so much smaller, all right? In almost every aspect, except the labor-intensive segment called assembly, packaging, and testing. APT, basically, you have to, as I said, cut out the chip, then you have to test the chip very often by manual labor, all right? And then assemble the chip and pack it with those little copper wire come out, so on and so forth. And AP, yeah.
So I see a marked difference in increase in also materials and also in wafer fabrication. What would be the reason for that?
Okay, that China is bigger than America.
Yeah,
okay,
it's almost twice.
Yeah, why? Because material could be just the silicon, the nugget that you slice out the wafers, and that one is not so difficult to make. Because, by the way, silicon is just sand, come out from sand, okay? And the next one is wafer fabrication. So wafer fabrication refers to the factories. And China has many factories, it's just that not the very advanced ones. Yeah? And hence China is quite significant in chip manufacturing. So in this sense, it's about 20%. Earlier measurement was 15 for year 2020. Sometimes there is some variation in this measurement, yeah? Okay, I hope I've given you some sort of deep dive into the industry, the kind of global production networks of it, and that's why this chips war, yes, we can all do this geopolitically and talk about, all the government policies, but at the end of the day, the industry is organized in a very peculiar way, in which that you need to understand it in order to understand how you can, if you like, think of policy, think of outcomes. So finally, just to say a few words about the importance of this topic. This research topic helps us to understand why you need to open the box. So I've spent some effort to help you to open the semiconductor black box in order to know what's inside, who make what where, because it's important you do that in order to assess whether the prevailing policies and the contestation and the rivalries make sense, so to speak. It's actually not countries fighting against each other. It's actually inter-firm rivalries. different production networks competing against each other. All right. You want to do well, you got to then develop your production networks. It's not so simple. There is also significant variability in the four factors I've mentioned earlier: cost, market, finance, and risks. All right. Depending on the variation, it will shape production network configurations differently. And that's the sort of conceptual argument we can make. Finally, we know the role of the state is important. However, the state cannot or does not necessarily get what it wants. And that's important to know. The state can pump out lots of money and pump out lots of restrictions, but the industry will respond differently. Why? Because the industry is a very complex one, and so on and so forth. So in terms of final policy issues, is to say, I think technology will remain the key factor in this particular industry. As we are talking, new chips have been designed, and in ways that unfortunately may make us lose our business. Why? Because, you know, as professors, we may lose our business soon if AI takes over our job in teaching, and so on. Particularly for younger scholars, I'm sorry to report, right? We are near retirement, so not too bad. Second is that network resilience is going to be the key issue, right? So despite the difficulty of moving production network, it's important to also to consider that, hey, you know, events can lead to significant disruptions to this particular industry. Yeah, I mean, if California, touch wood, has some earth shaking, if you like, straight away you will have big issue if you have manufacturing. Taiwan, as you know, recently had an earthquake. The TSMC was very fast to recover within 1 day, but even just 1 day, that day, every wafer is gone. Each one about $25,000 per wafer. Yeah, because per chip is few $100. Yeah, it's in millions gone straight away. Okay, so that's why you want a fab in your country or location. Do you have very good electricity stability? The moment electricity flip, whole batch gone again. This is a extremely I know. That's why you want, I mean, but of course you go Arizona, I'm going tomorrow. This is an industry that uses a lot of water too. TSMC alone use 10% of Taiwan's electricity, 10% of Taiwan's water. Do you have a lot of water in Arizona? I will find out tomorrow. Okay? I don't think so. I don't think so. So I'm afraid to report. Yes, you see, so you locate yourself in those places that you have environmental constraints, sure. But anything happen, it will disrupt, and hence we will run out of new Macs, new smartphones for you to buy, I'm afraid. All right. So network resilience is a key policy and research issue. Finally, of course, is the politics of global production, which I'm afraid has not sort of started well in this decade, the 2020s, and it will persist throughout this entire decade, I believe, all right, not until 2030, when such things become a bit more normalized, I presume. So finally, just to say, industrial development is about nurturing the specialized parts and niches of the value chain and production networks. No country can nationalize, can have the entire semiconductor GPN. It's not possible. You can't even make the whole machine by yourself, let alone the whole factory, let alone the whole industry. It's just not feasible. East Asia has been successful by being sort of doing parts of this. So TSMC is the extreme example of success. Just specialize in being the kitchen, but it will make food better than even the 3 Michelin star chefs. Yeah. So today it has succeeded, so on and so forth. And of course, I think there will be a great interest in the kind of moving from China-centric production network to kind of China +1 or China +N configurations, which will provide opportunities for many other parts of the world to gain from participation in this global value chain, global production network. Southeast Asia, we have been benefiting from this. Thank you very much. So it's not just about deglobalization, it's about re-globalization minus China part, so to speak. And this is again something we can study and examine in greater detail. Finally, as you can tell, much of what I've talked about has a lot to do with the idea of ecosystem, supply networks, production networks, being together in geographically sort of confined areas. So as geographer, you have to understand it's important to get us together, just like those of you. Thank you very much physically present here. Yeah. So thank you for supporting this event, both Center for Chinese Studies and the Berkeley Center. Thank you very much. And if you're interested, feel free to read my 2022 book and the GVC report chapter. Thank you.
Yeah. Are these companies like finding ways
Mm.
old ship, like what's happening to all these old
Oh,
ships?
oh,
Just
I
trying
see.
to find-
Right. Okay. So there is okay, but there are of course many papers written. I have a friend who wrote about this as well. There are lots of environmental recycling initiatives, whether our computers or the chips, there will be precious metal in them, so they will be melted and taken back. So there is recycling efforts going on. Yeah. But you can't use an old chip to refurbish it to be a new chip. It has to, you cannot. Yeah, because it's so delicate. The moment you take something out, do you want to buy your computer with a recycled chip? Do you want to be halfway writing your paper and the whole thing gone? Oops, I can hear something stopped. You know, literally, right? Aircon or whatever. So, yeah.
So you have mentioned these
Mm.
4 actors over here in the United States, with Qualcomm,
Mm.
then, ADM,
Hi,
and then
yeah.
NVIDIA, and I didn't hear you mention Intel in the same
Mm.
tone.
Mm.
So is there a reason for that? And my second question
Yep.
was, of course, being from India.
Hey.
Now, India, is boasting about so much technological
Yep.
advances,
Yep.
but it is missing in your graphic.
And then you
Exactly.
see the centric graphic, which
Yeah.
is around China. You show it in Sydney, you show it in,
Yeah.
West Coast, and you
Yeah.
show it in Latin America.
Yeah.
But
Where's
India is
India?
missing in that network.
Very
And I
good.
want to know the reason for that.
Very good questions, I think. First is to say, I would say Intel is absolutely on par, if not better, than the 4 fabless firms you're talking about. But Intel's main problem, so Intel, you have to understand, has been leading both in terms of sales as the #1 company in semicon, as well as the manufacturing technology until about 2017. It's not very long ago, about 7, 8 years ago, that TSMC Samsung overtook Intel in manufacturing technology because of the advancement in the nanometer chip making. Means making the distance between. Wait, this one I have to go a bit technical, I'm afraid. All right. So is that over lunch? You guys ask technology side. Okay. So remember, I mentioned, right? Currently, the 3 nano fab. Currently, the most advanced right now is 3 nano. If you look at your Apple chip, it's 3 nano. In your smartphone of my thumbnail size, we can pack about 20 to 30 billion transistors. Each pair of transistors will calculate 0101. And that's how you do computing, okay? So you need billions of processors so that every second you can calculate multiple billion. Yeah? The more, the faster. Make sense? Then how do you pack more transistors into that little space? Well, the distance between them must be narrower and narrower, isn't it? The narrower, the more you can pack. So currently it's 3 nano distance between the two of them. Yeah. Then eventually become 2 nano and then 1.5. But there is a limit to this. So basically, that's how the technology advancement in this industry moves. Yeah. So Intel used to be leading until the 10 nanometer transition. So the fabs move towards 10 nanometer. Intel, for some reason, screw up, and TSMC, Samsung move into 10 nano earlier. So much so that then, of course, if you are Apple, you wouldn't, well, you don't buy from Intel anyway. You will ask TSMC to make for you. That's how Intel lost the edge. But Intel is still the #1 in microprocessors that go into our, well, not the PC there. PC is still Intel inside. Our Mac used to be Intel inside as well, okay? So Intel inside, you remember this marketing logo, right? So Intel has been specializing in microprocessor, means the PC chip, but because of that, it's less advanced in what we call graphics processing units, GPU, and because of that, NVIDIA managed to design GPU faster, better than everybody, and hence in AI chips is about repetitive calculation, and hence graphics chips work better. Graphics chip, essentially every dot you see here, every dot, these are multiple millions of dots of different colors, correct? What you see. Each dot is a 0101 calculation. So it means it's repetitive.
NVIDIA has really taken off the
Yeah.
revenue. It's now the stock is worth 5 times. what
I
it
know.
used to be
Of
2
course,
years.
yeah, that's why I mentioned it's the 3rd most valuable company now after Intel, after Apple and Microsoft. It's even bigger than Amazon now.
So do you see it at the top of that tier as far as growth is concerned?
No, sorry, I'm not involved in stock speculation. So I'm just trying to explain to you why NVIDIA, being a GPU designer, graphics processing unit, doing the repetitive calculation, be able to switch over to do AI chips. If you ask me why Intel couldn't do AI chips better than AMD and NVIDIA, it's because the two of them, AMD and NVIDIA, are GPU designers. Huh? Got it? Okay, so I hope I've answered your first question. Second, why not India? Now, India, as you know, has very, very good what's called BPO, business process outsourcing business, meaning in the software design and software coding, yeah, and hence is net. And of course, so many of the leading Silicon Valley firms have Indian CEOs. So there is no reason India cannot do semicon, except one thing is that you need very, very good infrastructure. And India is not very well known for that. Right. So first is to do it, of course, the two come together, right? So bureaucracy leads to difficulty of infrastructure, which is very stable electricity, water supply, and then foreign investment, fuel, unsure. In my 2022 paper, there is a third factor. You don't have downstream customers. In other words, the chips that, if they were made in India, where do they go? They are supposed to go into laptops and smartphones. Not until recently, China used to assemble 95% of all the laptops, more than 95% of smartphones. You see what I'm saying? So of course you want to make the chips near there because then it goes straight into the machines. So these are the simple, straightforward reasons for why India today has no single fab, zero chip manufacturing as of today. Of course, Modi is trying to, well, incentivize some others to come and build, but hey, let's hear first. As you can tell, if it's so easy, you will be chip making everywhere. Remember that statement, huh? Michael?
I wanted to ask the kind of, first of all, thank you for
Hi.
such a rich
No.
introduction.
Hi.
I want to ask the inverse, which is, what are the factors, geographic, economic, cultural, that have led to Taiwan becoming such a
Yeah.
competitive leader in this area?
Mm.
And secondly, we all know about the very treacherous diplomatic dance between the US, China, and Taiwan
Yeah.
in recent years. How central do you see the chip
Mm.
factor
Mm.
in this triangular political relationship?
Very good question, Michael, again. First, thank you, is to say TSMC has come to where it is due to, of course, I used to write about Chinese family business, but now I feel like a cultural explanation can be problematic. That, oh yeah, we Asians work hard. Huh? This is not just a matter of working hard also. It's a matter of getting a few things right. To me, one of the key reasons for success was because Morris Chang, the founder of TSMC, who used to be up to #2 position at Texas Instruments here in America, senior vice president. He wasn't promoted to CEO. Taiwan brought him back. So went back. He went back and then eventually founded TSMC from a government research institute spin-off to start a new model or new business model. So that was fundamental. Because he started a new business model, I am the kitchen, you chef design your menu, I will make the food for you. Then you can sell to your customer happily. Why not? Huh? So that model was then revolutionary. So in that, then why, is that cultural? I don't think it has anything to do with he being a Chinese or Taiwanese or whatever it is. It's because he had experience working here in America. He had huge semicon experience. He came back and saw the market opportunity and then said, hey, here we don't have advanced technologies in Taiwan. Hey, but we can do the hard work for you. Means we built the factory and make the chips for you. Because the initial part was difficult, was not big. When Intel was like already 20 billion bucks, TSMC was less than 1 billion revenue. Okay? TSMC was a small little kitchen, put it that way. So in that sense, that's how it started. Then the Taiwanese government supported. The initial funding of TSMC was 60% owned by the Taiwan government, Executive Yuan Fund, and 40% owned by who? Philips, today's ASML. Actually, TSMC started with Philips ownership and Philips technology transfer, and the not so good one. So the lousy technology transfer, TSMC started. But the real success came later on. And that part, whether it has social, okay, so there is The only cultural part of this is this. It's more like current play, right? So Taiwanese engineers really, to be fair to them, work harder than engineers in America. So of course, when Biden asked the CEO, right, CC Wei, yeah, you know, why can't we have the chip factories here? So the CC Wei said, well, if in Taiwan, in Hsinchu or Tainan, if our engineers in the middle, this thing is terrible, it's very gendered, okay? In the middle of at 3 a.m., when the phone rings, the wife pick up and say, oh, the fab has issue. Okay, we'll wake the husband up to go back. Hey, hubby, go back to the fab. You are needed. and then the CEO told Biden, right, that in Arizona, if the same phone rang, the wife would simply throw the phone away. That is the difference in work culture. So now you know how difficult to make chips in America, because you know you guys don't want to work in the middle of the night. Okay, so that has a bit of cultural, but I don't want to rely excessively on that kind of explanation. But it is factual. It is possibly true. Yeah, in terms of work culture, because my sister-in-law worked in Micron, and I know the Taiwanese engineers really work hard in Taiwan. Very hard to replicate that culture. Yeah. So second question is even more important. How important is TSMC in this broader geopolitical gameplay? I would say TSMC is right now being seen as what's called the Silicon Shield for Taiwan. And the Taiwan people tend to also see, hey, we have the most advanced fabs here. Surely then, you know, China is unlikely to invade us and so on. So it's kind of like a Silicon Shield. But ironically, TSMC itself hates to be that shield. TSMC doesn't want to be part of this geopolitical rivalry. Why? Because it just wants to be a good kitchen. Leave me alone. We make food. We make good food. So the problem is that the firm doesn't like it, but it's in Taiwan. It's now the most valuable company, right? I mean, a big consumer of electricity and water as well. So it's stuck in this. And I would say the firm doesn't want it, but it is unfortunately part of the chess play. It's part of the actual chess. Yeah.
Thank you very much for your interesting presentation. I'm very curious about the development of semiconductor industry in mainland China,
Yeah.
especially in SMIC.
Okay.
Yes, some people say that in the recent global geopolitics, and some people say this global stakes become a very big obstacle for the mainland China's development in semiconductor industry, because due to the lack of the connection with the international market and technological transfer from the US in many other countries. But other people say it's this isolation from the international market rather stimulates the China's self-sufficient industrialization in mainland China.
Yeah.
And finally, China will be able to
innovate.
Develop the technological level
to the global level. But how do you see the China semiconductor industry's future?
So just briefly, just to say, in the concluding section of the Global Value Chain Development Report, I've outlined some of this kind of future scenario as well. Now, since your question is on China's semicon future, it goes like this. Unless there is significant revolution in perhaps an entirely new paradigm, it's no longer semiconductor, maybe superconductors, for the sake of argument, new material, not silicon-based, then China may have an opportunity to leapfrog and become, say, number one. Otherwise, it's just not possible for China to catch up, if you ask me now. Why? Because just think of that ASML machine. The ASML machine is not just done by ASML. It's done by co-investment from TSMC, Samsung, and Intel, already invested in that machine 10, 15 years ago to develop that technology that, as I told you, require many different suppliers, which are highly specialized. There are components in that machine in the world. There is only one. There is one Japanese firm doing certain part of that machine. Only that Japanese firm can do it at that level of precision and technology. So you say, okay, so China can do it. How? I mean, you can try to reverse engineer, you can try everything. You just can't because it takes time. It takes many different efforts. So this is not a single bottle to build. That one is very easy, but many hundred. Okay, assume even you manage to build the EUV machine to have the lithography technology to make, say, 3 nanometer chips. But do you know why TSMC becomes so advanced in manufacturing, so much so that it even overtook Intel? Is because customers matter. What does that mean? Intel makes only for itself, meaning in-house. It makes the chips, microprocessor, it dominates the market. As you know, about 85% of PCs use Intel chips. The other 15 is AMD, okay? So because you have 85 market, your engineers are so good in making the microprocessors. But once you have, because when Apple first started the smartphone in 2007, it actually went to Intel, asked, can you make the chips for us? Intel said, hey, it's small business, we don't want. Intel was so dominant in PC, right? Don't want to do. So that's why it's made by Samsung originally, right, in the Texas fab. So Samsung made the core application processor for Apple smartphone until 2015, then switch over to TSMC. It's fully documented in my book. I wrote 7, 8 chapters about it. I have privileged insights into it. So the point is, the reason why Intel could TSMC could catch up is because it has such a good customer known as Apple. Because Apple chip designers are so good, engineers work hand in hand with the manufacturer to advance the new process. So much so that poor Intel, because it doesn't have this kind of customer, Qualcomm, AMD, NVIDIA, and that's why that even if you have the entire kitchen in China, because you don't have the demanding customers like us when we go into a restaurant, I want this steak to be done exactly to 85% of perfection, If you don't have the demanding customer, no matter how, you have the same facility, but your chef doesn't have the experience of cooking for a very demanding customer, if you get what I mean. So that's why TSMC is so good in this. I hope I've answered that question. Yeah.
Thank you, Professor. My question is kind of related to the previous question. That is, I think your lecture provides a very good globalist vision to how all these small components from all over the world are interconnected and how each part plays a very crucial role. But my curiosity is, so as you mentioned, how specialized some of these small components are and how scattered they are across this international landscape. Then wouldn't it mean it's not as, it's kind of risky if one component just fall apart, and like how sustainable and how reliable would you say such diverse globalist network functions right now? And another possible perspective is like how do they self-sustain themselves? Like how do they recruit their own engineers, and who's training these engineers if they are so specialized in a specific amount of field?
Yeah, again, very good question. The opposite of the answer, I mean, basically the opposite implication is that why not? I mean, given that this is such a delicate industry, why not you try to make as much in-house as possible, right? Bring together, this is almost like academic knowledges. It's no longer dominated by the US. We in Singapore can also do some knowledge development known as research, right? So the whole idea is that there are talents everywhere now, and different talents have different orientation depending on the entrepreneurial setup, meaning the ecosystem where they are. And that's why certain countries specialize in certain part of the semiconductor manufacturing. Yeah. So if you say, okay, why not we reduce risk by, well, first of all, if that particular thing has only one supplier is in Japan, first, by the way, this thing is not easy for you to do. It's not patented. You can't just copy it. Okay, so we try to reduce dependency on the supplier. We try to get another company, say in Germany, to do it. Well, you can try, but meanwhile, you're losing competitiveness. If my machine is delayed, TSMC can buy from Applied Material instead of us. Then we lose. I'm afraid, as CEO, I have to be responsible to my shareholders. So to be fair, assuming there is no geopolitical conflict, this is actually optimal. Right now, it's actually optimal. Optimal because precisely you know, the whole industry benefit from specialization. Yeah, the specialization and risk. I mean, the kind of risk you're talking about is collective. So let's say, for the sake of argument, if that Japanese firm or that Korean firm is not allowed to export the component to ASML, everybody will suffer. Everybody, it's not just TSMC, but also Intel, but also Samsung. Yeah. Currently, it's only China that has been given the, if you like, the restrictions, right, to grow in semicon. But it's not restriction on the mature technology. 28 nano and higher means the wider the width. There is currently no restriction, meaning China, but in Chinese, okay, the US is trying to do something funny again, right? On even that, but the point is that one is even harder to restrict, all right? It's no point, yeah. Basically, you know, if you restrict the kitchen from making hamburgers, come on, everybody know how to make hamburger. What's the problem? You see what I'm saying? But in that very delicate 炒飯, I don't know, whatever you talk about, you know, as a metaphor, that is something that only a few kitchens can do. Got it? So this is just the nature of most economic activities today. Almost across every industry you can name, production tends to be global, tends to be highly spatially dispersed. In automotive, it's by region. North America, the entire North America, the entire Europe, the entire Asia. That's for cars, for EVs and the like. Yeah.
Thank you so much for the lecture.
So you mentioned geopolitics a little bit in that last answer. So how do you think the dynamics of the industry would change if China were to invade Taiwan?
First, I will buy shares. No, I'm kidding. Okay, so basically it goes like this, right? If China want to give troubles to semicon industry, right, whether to do it, taking back Taiwan or not is a separate thing. It doesn't have to invade. It just have to shoot some missiles. Once, I mean, how many can you block? Yes, you can block some. Eventually, one or two will fall into the fab, and that's it, lah. Because even small disruption, the whole thing shut down. Whole production is gone. So, I can, of course, nobody can predict this, right? Not even the Department of Defense and so on. Not even China themselves know, of course. So the moral of the story is, from the industry point of view, I doubt they want to plan for this. It's not something plannable. You can't plan for this in terms of the so-called invasion. Yeah? But for China to disrupt the Taiwanese economy is possible. But then it's not in China's interest to disrupt TSMC right now. Because why? Much of China's employees, there are millions of people working for Foxconn, the Taiwan company in Zhengzhou, China, assembling your iPhone. Hey, the moment the chip is not on, those million workers will go off. What will happen? You see what I'm saying? So to China, it's not really in its interest to disrupt chip production.
Okay, so can I rephrase this?
Yeah.
So
If China were to be in possession of Taiwan's
As a whole.
capacity, yeah, how would that change the industry if like TSMC was then answering to the Chinese government?
I see.
I mean, some of the comments I've read in recent years, months would be that then essentially they just blow up the factories. Because once the kitchen is destroyed, it's no use. You can take my kitchen, but remember, it's no longer in the configuration that is absolutely right for making that very, very, very advanced chips. See what I'm saying? And the very machine once is, well, as you know, it's just like a computer, right? Once I screw up the CPU, you are finished. I can give you the whole Mac, no use. Yeah. So it's very easy actually to destroy the factory. Very easy. Just destroy a few machines. Then you can take over the factory space. Come on, it's nothing. Yeah. And of course, the engineers, I mean, TSMC's deep secret is the few hundred engineers. The few hundred engineers will know exactly how, because you know, these machines are so delicate and each wafer will go through about 1,000 steps. Anything can go wrong during which. And the engineers must know how to calibrate the machine. You know, it's like turning the knobs. No, they use, keyboard, computer to type in, and the machine will have to calibrate a little bit more of this, a little bit less of this. Yeah. And it's in their brains. That's why you and I cannot easily copy. That's why it's very difficult to do it in Arizona, because these guys have to move there to operate the machines. Why? Because you don't have American engineers who are as capable doing it, because you have to have that experience. See what I'm saying? Intel engineers are very good in doing Intel chips, but not logic chips. Yeah, as simple as that. Yeah, Intel specializes in French cuisine, if you get it. But TSMC can do anything from McDonald's to French to Indian to, Californian food. Got it? So that's why the engineers exactly know how to control the fire, 火候, or the wok and the pan and so on. So with those few hundred people, very difficult. This is the asset. Same goes to Samsung in Korea. Same. There is a few hundred Korean engineers which are really the true asset of the company. You can have the machine. You don't have the human bodies. You can't operate them well to do the 3 nano. Because if it's so easy, you will have it already.
Consequences if next year there is a different government in the United States? Since I have been reading German magazine, Der Spiegel, which has in the last 6 months very detailed accounts that are, to my consciousness, very threatening. So I just want to have your input because I think the realities of economics are different than just like your politician's ambition. Can you see what could happen?
Yeah. Say to against semiconductor industry rather than say global economy. Of course, a different government means return of Trump, which currently the kind of sort of mainstream view on Trump is that if Trump becomes the president in November, US economic policy won't change substantially. Meaning, for example, it won't be very pro-China friendly. It's not possible. But it's also unlikely to be more anti-China in economic terms. It may provide less of a shelter for Taiwan. But then, as I said, it doesn't make sense for China to invade Taiwan for economic gain. It can invade China for sovereignty reason. That one is their national choice. But for economic, it's basically no use. So in short, barring that kind of unexpected military events, which of course, as you know, if there is such a military event, China, Taiwan, even Singapore, Southeast Asia entirely, we are finished too, okay? It's not a small matter. We are entirely dependent on this whole region not having major conflicts. So assuming we don't have that, economically, I don't think there is huge difference. Yeah, because I don't think Trump's team will change much of the policy on this kind of, say, US restriction on technology exports to China. And Trump is unlikely to say, oh, wow, 52 billion is too little, according to some professor who spoke at UCLA. I'm going to put 1 trillion USD, all right, to support the chip industry. Do you think so? He will put into his own pocket rather than support the chip industry. I doubt. So in other words, no huge change. See what I'm saying? Yeah.
Very interesting. I haven't thought about this much. So
Yeah.
I think my question is very basic, but you were mentioning how there are like 100 or so engineers in both of these countries and these factories that have the specific knowledge to operate the machines.
Yeah.
But as we go forward and AI comes into play, and AI, let's say, comes to a point where that machine handling or the algorithm is able to do it maybe even better than the human, what then?
I think, okay, so the short answer to this is that it's easier for the AI to replace both Michael and me than to replace those engineers. Why? Because unfortunately, Michael, our thing can be codified, our publications, what we have written. What is in our mind, we tend to codify it in the form of writing. Those, you can't write down like a cookbook. When this thing happened, yeah, we have to turn this knob by 0.01 degree. That kind, it just because without the written manual, the machine can never learn it. The machine, first of all, has to learn it, right? So, but the machine can learn our writing style and churn out some papers look like what we write. If you get what I mean. Right? So no, this is very unlikely. Yeah.
Something
Oh, no. These are the manufacturing engineers. Then the AI chip designers are all in Silicon Valley, the US. Hi. So they are different. And then designer of AI chips doesn't mean that, of course, if you are the designer of the AI chip, you yourself will ensure that the AI will never replace you. Meaning that what you do is not, put it in short, algorithmable. Yeah, it's possible. I mean, the way we make our thing not algorithmable is that our teaching is not standardized. It's highly customized, depending on student need. So you can't replace me. Yeah, writing is the same, right? You see what I'm saying? So you can of course feed all my publication into the ChatGPT or the like, and then try to simulate what I write. But I can creatively add some flavor to my writing every paper in a sort of non-standardized way. You can't do that. You know, a Henry Young paper is a Henry Young paper. Put it in short. So it's just like artists is the same, right? How do you prevent replication? That's how you do. We can beat the machine, to be fair. We are not dumb. But for standardized things, I'm afraid, yes, the machine can do better than us. Yeah.
Very thank you for your presentation. I have one small question. Can, like, let's say the EV business, electric vehicles, change or shape the dynamic in this chip wars or chips game?
Okay, I'm thinking, huh? So whether EV can change or shape the current rivalry in semicon industry, chances are not high. Why? Because I think EV, by and large, we see as downstream customers. By the way, because of the transition from petrol engine to EV, the usage of semiconductors will go even more. So petrol-driven cars typically use 20 to 25% of the value of the car is in electronics. But EV is more than half. Yeah. So more than half the value of an EV goes into electronics and primarily semiconductors. There are hundreds of chips to control everything you need in that machine, the EV, the car itself. Okay, so in other words, the demand for chips will be higher in EV than petrol engine cars. And whether EV rivalry will, even though for the same argument, let's say the US or Europe slap huge tariffs on China EV exports, for the same argument, hasn't started, right? As of now, yeah? Let's assume it does, all right? So what will be the big impact on semicon suppliers? Not really, because unless you guys don't buy EVs, that is the problem. The EVs still have to be made. Consumer need will be satisfied. But can it be all made by Tesla? No, you don't want all Tesla cars on the streets. Terrible. Can the Italians do it? No, they don't have good EVs. Germans, maybe. Japanese, maybe. Yeah, means demand for chips will still be there. It's just not by EV makers in China. But whether that war will succeed is another story. I doubt it too, yeah, because China is so good, so efficient in making EVs. Yeah, that one is another story. Do I have to deal with any online questions?
There's no online ones, but I think we've reached our witching hour, so to speak. And so,
because I have a chat, sorry, I just see.
Oh, that's just me.
Okay, you're monitoring.
Yes, I've been monitoring it, so we're okay there. But why don't we thank Professor Young for such a rich, stimulating talk.
Thank you, everybody, and thank you, online audience. Yeah, it's wonderful. Yeah.
Yes, thanks, everyone. And for those who participated virtually and in person, we encourage you to come to future events, both at the Berkel Center and the Center for Chinese Studies. And thank you all for your participation.